So here's an example. Okay, here's a great example of people propagating information that just is not true and then reversing themselves willy-nilly. So for months, we heard that if you open schools, it was a disaster. Mostly we heard that from a media that was convinced that Trump had to be wrong about everything because Trump was out there saying, you need to open the schools. This is silly. It's bad. It's hurting kids. And teachers' unions were saying, no, we need to keep the schools closed. And for months, the media were like, you know what? Trump's the worst, man. Let's keep those schools closed. We don't know how dangerous it's going to be. It could kill little kids. We don't know. Doesn't matter. The stats show that little kids are not dying of this. It still could kill little kids, right? It's deeply, deeply dangerous. And then people take that to heart. And this leads to footage like this footage. This is from Oregon, of a teacher stopping an anti-lockdown protester to scream and shout like a crazy person because she is very upset that people are protesting against lockdowns. And she's talking about how her her kids' families are dying of COVID and how she's at risk. Here's a little bit of that footage. Okay, that sort of hysteria, that is hysteria. There's no other way to put it. That sort of hysteria is utterly unjustified, but it's been pushed by teachers' unions and by the media. The Chicago's teachers' union over the weekend tweeted out, it's got 28,000 members. They tweeted out, quote, the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. Sexism, racism, and misogyny, right? This has been the narrative of the left. It's been the narrative of the media. So why exactly would we trust the media when it comes to either shutting down or reopening? Because here is now the editorial board of the Washington Post coming along in December, right? In the middle of the worst outbreak that we've seen thus far. An editorial board that was like, we're not sure about this whole school thing. We're not, Here is the editorial board of the Washington Post. What could have changed in the last month? Could there have been an election or something? Because here's the new headline. Students have already lost too much time. They need to be back in classrooms. Oh, weird. Because those of us who were saying this months ago were castigated and are still being castigated by the teachers' unions as people who don't care about the lives of teachers who are bad, uncaring, unfeeling evil. Now here's the Washington Post that was propagating a lot of this panic porn for months on end. And they're like, you know what? It's time for kids to go back to school. Yeah, no bleep, Sherlock. But you think I'm going to trust you on that? Wrongo. Not going to trust you on that. I'm going to trust people who've been fairly consistent throughout this whole thing, looking for reasonable measures. But here comes the Washington Post, and why? Look at that. They think Joe Biden was elected president, and now they've reversed themselves on schooling. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, teachers, principals, administrators, and parents across the U.S. have worked mightily to help students keep learning. Students develop new curricula, schools develop new curricula, provided children with portable computers, labored to give some semblance of structure to remote learning. Even with these efforts, remote learning has failed to provide anything approaching the quality of education that can be delivered by a teacher in a classroom. It's clear that there are pernicious effects of keeping children out of schools. We recently asked a top official in a Washington area jurisdiction who insisted on anonymity why there wasn't more of a push to figure out ways to return children to the classroom. The answer was there was no political pressure. Parents of means can give their kids the help and resources they need or switch them to a private school. Parents of minority or disadvantaged students with the most to lose have the least clouts. Well, maybe it's because you in the media didn't do your damn jobs on the COVID pandemic all the way from the beginning, and you're still not doing your job. You're still not doing your job. Okay, you continue to purvey the panic porn that suggests that everybody is equally likely to die of this virus. You keep suggesting over and over that full-scale lockdowns that are completely hypocritical in their actual application are totally fine. When's the last time, by the way, you saw a business owner who'd been completely destroyed on CNN or MSNBC? You only see it on Fox News. You only hear about that from my show or shows like it. You won't hear it in the media. But this is the media that asks you to trust them? This is the same media that's blaming Trump for lack of COVID relief. Well, now Nancy Pelosi has completely flipped on COVID relief, and nobody in the media will even notice it. So Nancy Pelosi, who has held up a COVID relief package for months on end for no apparent political reason other than to get beyond the election because she thought it would hurt Trump, now she says we're not leaving Washington, D.C. without the relief. And the media are like, oh, look at that, Nancy Pelosi, leader. It's incredible. Here's Nancy Pelosi being a giant hypocrite.
We have to have an omnibus. And we're hoping that that will accelerate the discussions on the omnibus. We are going to keep government open. We're not going to have a continuing resolution, but we need to take the time to do that. And then, as I said, we saw a framework. They're putting, now they have to turn it into text. And then, so we'll take the time we need, and we must get it done. And we must get it done by before we leave. We cannot leave without it.
I mean, and the media just went right along with this. The media are just like, oh, look at that, Nancy Pelosi leader. Yeah, I trust you guys. I trust you guys on COVID. I trust you guys on COVID relief. I trust you guys on voter fraud. Or I don't trust you on any of this stuff. It is your lack of credibility that has led to a rise of radical, almost deconstructionist skepticism in the very notion that there is such a thing as a fact or truth. Now, there are a lot of people in the media who've said we live in a post-truth era. Yeah, you created it. You created the post-truth era. If you want revision of that era, if you want to go back to a truth-free era, how about this? How about you be the skeptics? And I mean that you need to actually check your own side. Ask tough questions of Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden. And maybe at that point, somebody will start from the right thinking they are a credible source. Otherwise, shut up. Nobody trusts you. I mean, you're ridiculous. You're just ridiculous. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.